Welcome to Stealing from Wizards Volume 1, Pickpocketing, by R.A. Consul, read by the author. Chapter 24, Headaches. Crow woke not long after with his head throbbing, and his chest felt as though someone were sitting on it. Sabine and a pair of wizards in white he didn't know were tending to him. Sabine looked battered and distressed, but relieved when Crow awoke. Crow sat up and looked around. The church was busy with people. A dozen dangerous-looking mages in green uniform coats were talking to each other. Hounds. Several of them pointed charged wands or loaded crossbows threateningly at Phineas, while their canine familiars, including one large wolf, held him in place. Despite being bound and gagged, his eyes burned with a fury that made Crow want to run. Ms. Crawley was standing apart from the others, looking very dark and unsettled. She was leafing through Phineas's journal and scowling at what she saw. Father John was trying to calm the other spirits in the church without screaming too much, with mixed success. Ms. McCutcheon was there as well, unkempt but apparently unharmed, judging by how furiously she was arguing. The man she was engaged with was, of course, Talon Dubois. He was attempting to treat her dismissively and was failing completely, to the obvious amusement of some of the other hounds. "You knew. You bloody well knew, and you didn't tell me," scolded the principal. "I suspected, Leith. It was only a suspicion," soothed Dubois. "I couldn't be." "Don't Leith me, Talon Dubois." Her brow furrowed so deeply that Crow thought her eyebrows would touch. "He could have died. He very nearly did. What could be gained from keeping a secret like this?" Something about that accusation struck a chord with the hound. "Look," he said testily, "I thought it would be better if he didn't have it hanging over his head." "And we would have been much better prepared to deal with it if we had known." Ms. McCutcheon grabbed him by the collar and pointed at Phineas with obvious disgust. "And wasn't he supposed to be in your prison?" Dubois cringed at the accusation. Crow would have watched this all day. Seeing Dubois dismantled like a truant child was delightful. He wasn't allowed to enjoy it for long, though. Sabine, who was helping him sit up, cleared her throat politely to get the arguing pair's attention and said, "He's awake." Ms. McCutcheon looked deeply relieved, and she swept over to him. "Crow, how are you feeling?" She doted over him, checking his wounds and looking so worried and maternal that Crow thought she might be ensorcelled. "I'm fine," answered Crow, though the splitting pain in his head said otherwise. He felt like his brains were going to leak out his nose. "Crow," she paused and looked very apprehensive. "Do you know what happened to Charlie? We can't find her. She disappeared with you at the beginning of the fight and—" "She's in my bag," interrupted Crow. He looked around for it and found that he was lying on top of it. He opened it up and yelled inside, "Hey, Charlie, you okay?" Charlie was sitting on the floor inside his bag, leaning against some shelves. "Yeah, fine. Did we win?" she shouted back. They didn't need to shout, but something about the space inside the bag made things seem farther away. "Yep, everything's fine now, I think. Do you want to come out?" He laid the bag on its side and allowed Charlie to crawl out. Ms. McCutcheon's caring expression slid from her face. She did not look at all pleased. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "I don't know," said Crow, pulling it tight to his chest protectively. He didn't want it taken away, and he definitely didn't want to get Ms. Wong from the Lost and Found in trouble for it. "I got it for Solstice. There was no name on the card." She turned away, her expression frozen in frustration. "Dubois!" she bellowed. "How did you—" Dubois started before collecting himself. "I've no idea what you're talking about." "You sent a 12-year-old boy an illegal magical artifact as a Yule gift." Ms. McCutcheon had returned to her full principalness and was scolding him harshly. "What were you thinking, putting a magical field container in the hands of a child?" "It's not illegal," Dubois defended. "It's properly registered." "So you're abusing your influence as commander of the guard, then?" Crow looked at the bag, conflicted. Dubois had given it to him? Why? Did it matter? It was one of the two things he owned that he really cared about. Having it come from Dubois kind of spoiled it. Even so, he hoped desperately that it wouldn't be taken from him. "Look," said Dubois, attempting to stand up to Ms. McCutcheon.
He stumbled across it in the Lost and Found and seemed quite fond of it. I just thought he might not have much of a solstice, so I sent something along."
They continued to bicker back and forth, but Charlie distracted Kuro from the show. She stood beside him, her eyes fixed on Phineas, who was still being held in place by several hounds. "That's really him, isn't it?" she said a little distantly. Kuro nodded slightly. Charlie's fists clenched, and her eyes started to shine with moisture. She walked shakily between the arguing adults and stood facing the bound wizard. She stared for a few moments, then began to shake. Whether out of rage or sorrow or both, Kuro couldn't tell. Without warning, she lunged forward and swung wildly with her clenched fist. She landed a solid hit right in the face before a pair of hounds grabbed her and dragged her away. "You stole my mother!" she screamed. Sabine ran to her and put her arms around her, letting Charlie sob into her shoulder.
"What was that about?" asked Dubois, shocked by the display.
Ms. McCutcheon got very close to Dubois, forcing him to look her in the eye. "That is Charlotte Cook, Mr. Head of the Hounds. She is Helena Vigdis's daughter."
"Oh,"
was all Dubois could manage. "Kuro's best friend."
"Oh,"
repeated Dubois, looking very uncomfortable. "Again, something we could have been prepared for if you weren't keeping secrets from me." The principal's words were crisp and cutting. Dubois was rescued from further assault by one of the hounds. "Boss, why are we keeping her in here? Can we bring him back to Niflheim already?" said the grizzled, angry-looking woman with a slobbering boarhound at her heel.
"Because I want him to remove the curse from Kuro," explained Dubois.
"What curse?" demanded McCutcheon, rounding on Dubois once more. Their brief ceasefire ended.
"Kuro is cursed," Dubois explained. "A curse we couldn't identify."
"And you saw no reason to let us know that there was a potentially dangerous curse wandering around campus?" complained Ms. McCutcheon. "Or did you need to keep it to yourself in case you could ever use it to your advantage?"
"I thought he would be safe at Avalon," said Dubois accusingly.
"I thought Niflheim was inescapable," countered Ms. McCutcheon. "Please stop fighting in front of the children," interrupted Sabine sweetly. "They have had a very difficult day." Dubois calmed a bit at Sabine's scolding and glanced almost apologetically at Kuro.
"Look, the curse was too dangerous to Kuro for us to remove, and I wasn't going to let Phineas know we had Kuro in custody or give him any access to him. We weren't even certain that Kuro and Phineas were related, but since that cat's out of the bag, as it were, now seems a fine time to undo this thing."
Dubois turned his attention to the bound Phineas, and the captain's familiar, the large wolf Garmer, growled menacingly.
"How about you do your one good deed for the day and tell us how to break that curse?"
Dubois suggested with ice in his voice. Phineas replied only with a cruel and victorious grin. "He can't." Ms. Crawley had remained silent and unnoticed until now. She closed Phineas's journal and walked over to where Kuro was sitting. She knelt down and spoke directly to Kuro, where the others had only spoken to each other. "It's baked right in," she said. Her eyes were full of deep sadness, and Kuro had a hard time looking into them. "Worked into every cell of your body from the moment you were conceived." "What are you talking about?" interrupted Ms. McCutcheon. Ms. Crawley responded to Ms. McCutcheon, but didn't look away from Kuro. "We created you. It took years of experimentation to mix Blandland science and technology with magic to make you. You are our only success. None of the others survived incubation. You're the world's only half-Luton." It was true. Phineas hadn't been lying when he'd said that Kuro was just an experiment. "Why did you do it?" asked Kuro. Ms. Crawley sighed very deeply before continuing. "We were going to overthrow the government. We needed soldiers, powerful wizards who could go anywhere and do anything they were ordered, and be perfectly loyal to the masters. So we combined the genetics of a witch and a Luton, and built in a curse from the beginning to make him unable to disobey. The hope was to make a unit that could cast like a wizard, travel like a Luton, follow orders without question, and be indistinguishable from a human. It looks like we may have failed more or less on every front, particularly the obedience part." She tousled Kuro's hair affectionately.
"You are saying 'we' a lot," said Dubois suspiciously.
"Yes," Ms. Crawley responded, not turning from Kuro. "I helped. I was on the team. It was Phineas, a master neuromancer, Roche, a master enchanter, Vincent, a stray geneticist, and myself, a spellcraft specialist. Until today, I believed I was under Phineas's control the whole time. All I remember of those 2 years were hazy dreams. It seemed the truth was that they had stolen my memories. They were returned this afternoon. If you were on Phineas's side, why did you help me today? Asked Kuro. Because, Kuro. Ms. Crawley smiled softly. I have had 12 years to become a better person. I made some very bad choices when I was younger. I don't think it was their intention, but they gave me another chance at doing better when they took my memories. Phineas thought I would join him again once I remembered. I almost did. But I have spent the last decade learning and teaching. I've taught students to defend themselves from people like him. I'm not the person he thought he knew. Are you going to have to go to Niflheim? Asked Kuro quietly. Probably, yes, answered Ms. Crawley as she brushed some of Kuro's hair out of his face. So you're not coming back to teach next year? I'm sorry, no, she said softly. So, Kuro's mind was turning over ideas slowly, still several steps behind the conversation. If you help create me, does that make you my mom? He wasn't sure why he asked it. A small part of him just thought that it wouldn't be so bad if he had one, and that she wouldn't be the worst option. She put her arms around him and hugged him tightly. Kuro had never been hugged like that. He didn't really know what to do. He felt glad and sad at the same time, and tears started flowing freely from his eyes, though he wasn't crying. No, Kuro, she said. I'm sorry. I'm no more your mother than Phineas was your father. I've no right to be either. I did terrible things, Kuro. But at least one good thing came of my mistakes. I'm very proud of who you've become. You're already a better person than I've ever been. She released him and held him at arm's length as if to appraise him and nodded approvingly. Will I ever see you again? Asked Kuro. I hope so, said Miss Crawley with a forced smile. She turned away from Kuro to face Dubois. Her teary eyes turned hard and her face stiffened with resolve. Here, she said, handing him Phineas's journal. This should explain a great deal. I recommend destroying it. I'm ready to go when you are. Thank you, Beatrice. Dubois looked conflicted. You're a very clever witch, he said. If you made a run for the Blandlands now, I'm not sure I'd be able to track you down. She did not act on Dubois' suggestion. Instead, she presented her hands to be bound. I expect I will need to be gagged as well. Yeah, I suppose you will, said Dubois, accepting her surrender reluctantly. Dubois turned to Ms. McCutcheon. Will you be all right bringing the children back on your own? I could provide an escort. Thank you, Talon, said Ms. McCutcheon, her voice finally friendly towards the hound. Sabine, would you be able to take Miss Cook home to her father? I think she may need to spend a few days with her family. I will be along as soon as I can to explain what has happened. Charlie and Kuro hugged before they left. Thanks for coming to save me, he said. Any time, she answered, and they hugged again. I'll see you soon. Don't have any fun without me. Father John screeched his farewells too and wished Kuro well. Kuro promised to visit whenever he could, and this seemed to please the tortured spirit very much. Some hounds drove Kuro and Ms. McCutcheon back to the ferry dock. Danny's motorboat was moored there, and she was waiting for them at her Blandlands dock when they arrived, at last, back at Avalon. She held Gray and paced anxiously. Upon their arrival, Danny hugged both of them in relief and informed them that they were never to do that to her again. Kuro looked up at Ms. McCutcheon. The tyrant he thought he knew wore a warm and gentle expression and hugged Danny back with equal relief. He wondered how many other students had been allowed to see her like this, disheveled, warm, and smiling. He suspected it was very few. For the moment they passed back through the veil, her appearance righted itself. She muttered as she walked away from the ferry dock, and as she did, she slowly reverted back to the Ms. McCutcheon he knew. Her gray-streaked hair returned itself to a tight bun, her clothes righted and mended themselves, and the warmth and fatigue drained from her face, leaving her once again grim and proper. Once finished with herself, she did the same to Kuro, and his filthy, tattered clothes mended and cleaned themselves. That should save us some questions, said the renewed Ms. McCutcheon in a businesslike tone. I will take you to the infirmary. Your wounds should be properly attended to by a nurse, and I suspect a quiet night's sleep would do you some good. They didn't receive a single suspicious look on the way to the infirmary. Nobody they passed seemed to have even noticed them missing. The nurse took him in and had him drink a concoction that made him very sleepy. He fought it for a little while. His head was racing with the day's events, but he had been exhausted before the drink, and its encouragement to sleep was more than he could contend with. His last thoughts as he drifted off to sleep were of Ms. Crawley and what she had said. He laughed to himself about the idea of him being a soldier. For once, he was glad to be a failed experiment. Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.